listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. Today is November 23rd, 2021, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the show. Today I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing this fine Tuesday?
Well, Spencer, hello. Good morning. We're recording pretty early by our standards, so I think I'm awake. I'm ready to talk some WoW. We got some stuff to cover. It's a bit of a slow week in some ways because we don't see a lot of tuning changes or anything. There's no PTR. We know that most of Blizzard is on vacation for the holiday week in the States, so there's still stuff to do in the game, and there's a couple of holiday events running right now, which gives you some variety, but. We have some news items to wrap up from 9.2, but other than that, I think we can expect kind of just hanging out for a couple weeks. We're not gonna see that PTR or anything actually playable this week, but I think they set expectations on that, and we know what to do. So we're just it's a holiday week, and that means it's the actual birthday of WoW. It's the birthday of Shadowlands already. It's been I don't know where it all goes, but so that's kind of where we're at this week.
Yeah, it's exciting for me this week because we had that interview with Morgan Day on Friday, which was great, and there was some stuff that was up in the air as to whether or not that was going to happen, and it ended up happening, which was great. So we were thrilled to have that happen. That's why we didn't give you more notice really about social media and whatnot promoting. There was some things that may have come up that prevented it. So I was glad that that happened and it went really well. Big shout out and thanks to all the people who tuned in to watch, as well as all those who've been listening. And I know yesterday and today has been a big listen point for a lot of our commuting fans, so that's great. I'm glad you listeners are enjoying the show and you're starting to get the episodes in, and obviously you'll get this one in today or tomorrow on your commute, which is great.
Or for your Thanksgiving travel, potentially.
Yeah, save them up. Double episode for your Thanksgiving travel would be good too. Yeah,
and,
there's
big thanks to Laura and Morgan also for making that happen and for taking the time. It was a great chat. I think we got some really good information out there that people have been curious about since the 9.2 reveal a couple weeks ago. So that was a really great opportunity to just, have a conversation about it. Like, okay, here's the bullet point, but what does it mean? How do we play around with it? Like, what does it mean to us as players? That was great.
Well, and how's it going to impact us as players is the other large thing, right? Just in so many ways, since whenever a new patch like this comes out, everyone's trying to find their best daily loop, right? Or at least an expectation of what their daily loop would look like. And so being able to sort of pull some of that information out and get that out there to everybody was great. So yeah, big thanks to both Josh, Lore, and over to Morgan for hanging out. And obviously we'd love to do it again. We do it again this week if they'd allow us to, because man, there's more questions for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we still have questions about, and we really enjoyed. So thanks.
It's one of those things where without a PTR, it's like some of the stuff is just not obvious. So you have a topic that it results in a question that results in follow-up that then spurs more questions, right? And I think some of that stuff will come into focus more once people can play around with PTR, which will probably be like next week, I would imagine, after the holiday. So not too much longer.
Yeah, no. All right, well, before we dive into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft, Jason, there's a little bit of an ABK update I know you want to go through.
Yeah, a little bit. Stuff is getting pretty weird over at Activision Blizzard Corporate HQ. Bobby Kotick is still the CEO. The workers have been vocal about petitioning for his removal. There is a public petition from customers that I think has over like 20,000 signatures, or maybe more than that at this point. Last time I looked, it was up there. Industry leaders have spoken out about the story that we were talking about last week in the Wall Street Journal, and a couple heads of platform holders, specifically Sony and Microsoft Xbox, have publicly said they're evaluating their relationship with Activision Blizzard, as long as current management stays in place. This has been a complete, bad PR avalanche over the last week. Every news outlet gaming press, mainstream media, financial press is talking about this story. The stock price is tanking. It's hitting like record lows, and the board is standing by Bobby Kotick. Last night, in the middle of the night, Activision Blizzard put out a press release saying they were forming a workplace responsibility committee, which consists of 2 current members of the board, not employees, but independent directors of the board. I don't know what kind of confidence this instills in anybody that anything will change. These are the people that are protecting Bobby Kotick and have allowed this culture to be the way it is for, 20 odd 30 years under Kotick, and that then the 2008-ish merger between Vivendi and Activision, and combining these kind of cesspools that were festering at both places. I can't see this as anything other than like a desperation attempt to get the press off their backs so that they can start focusing on, recovering some stock points. This isn't like an independent oversight type of situation. Like, yes, these board members are not employees, but they have, drastic financial stakes in the company. There's no reason, I think, as an outsider to go, okay, well, the board has formed a workplace responsibility committee. They're going to, independently review all this. It's not independent. Like, it's not third party. It's not going to result in anything actionable. I don't feel like. I think pressure from the rest of the industry and pressure from, Activision Blizzard King workers, that stuff can possibly result in some change in the situation. The board is obviously not going to change itself, I guess, to any large degree. And by that, I mean, by keeping everybody in place. There was some story going around the other night that, Bobby Kotick has privately said that he would consider stepping down if he can't resolve the issues quickly, which is such a joke. And the fact that even gets picked up and run with like something is happening is a little embarrassing, I think. I mean, he's had decades to fix any of this. He's been an active participant, and he's part of the reason why the culture is the way it is. And there's no reason for anybody to expect that anything will change as long as he's in the job. And that includes the people that enable him to sit the board. So, it seems like stuff is starting to crumble. The lower that stock price dips, the more pressure is going to be on the board, on executive management, and they're not going to be able to turn it around. There is no. The solution to this, I feel like at this point, is the removal of the CEO and potentially much of the C-suite, potentially members of the board, because the people that are invested in this company are not going to be happy about the amount of money they've lost in the last 4 months. It's bizarre to see it continuing to happen, because you'd think like it would be an easy win, but the bottom line is Kotick is protected by the board. It's an old boys and gals club, and they've made a lot of money off of each other over the years. It's obvious that this is what they want. These individuals that are in these positions of power at this company, this is their desired outcome. They want these people to have these responsibilities. It's a shame. I feel bad for, for the everyday employees of Activision Blizzard. They just have to go to work and try to make cool games and sell them to us and make cool stuff. And, this is just consuming the news cycle every single day, hopefully before too much longer. I mean, you're seeing the stock be, devalued, and various analysts are I saw somebody downgraded it to like sell now, yesterday. That was all over the place. Like, people are cashing out, and I think the price is going to continue to tumble. Nothing's going to change, right? There's no way that Bobby Kotick and current leadership can say, okay, we're doing this. Everything's going to be demonstrably better very soon. You can regain your confidence in our organization. That I don't see a way that could even possibly happen. So hopefully he's gone, and there's some kind of big turnover sooner than later.
Yeah, I hope so too. Obviously, I echo what you said, and I'd reinforce that it's not just, there's so many organizations that work with Blizzard, not just Xbox and Sony and those sorts of other publishers that are considering pulling support, but also like Girls Who Code, the organization that they also pulled their support this past week. So there's a lot of different bailouts that are happening on really good, positive organizations saying we don't want to be associated with you. So I think that the damage is getting worse, And hopefully shareholders and, well, at least the board starts looking at this and going, okay, well, we can't let this damage continue to happen week over week. It's just getting worse and worse. So,
and hopefully, the shareholders, maybe can have some kind of collective voice, and express their displeasure, express their desire for change, because they want their money.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. That is how, publicly traded companies function.
Yeah.
The current leadership is not serving the investors. The investors do have some degree of power, but I think they need to potentially, enforce that collectively. Individual investors don't have a lot of power, but investor groups can shift things. Yeah. So I don't know. I think at this point, like, we sort of have to hope that their industry partners continue to shun them, maybe cut them off from markets and platforms, and that spurs more collective action from investors.
Yeah. All right. Enough about that. Let's dive into World of Warcraft. And Jason, is there anything you wanted to highlight this past week from your week?
Oh man, this week was it was a real roller coaster of rating. For some reason, we just wiped on almost every single boss, I think, in Heroic Sanctum at least once. It was weird. We did a weird collection of people. We were kind of overhealing, but we had healers that weren't even really necessarily pulling their weight. And we had a bunch of alts. We had some people who didn't have experience with certain bosses and just didn't have enough DPS to round out the amount of people that were showing up, which, that causes some weird problems. But, a lot of the early deaths were just mechanics related. It's like, I don't care if you're playing an alt or you're playing an unfamiliar role, you still have to do the mechanics or we die. You're not just along for the ride so we can funnel gear to you. And that's always a tricky thing when people want to bring alts that they're not experienced with, So we ended up having, I put raid on the calendar for Sunday. Heroic Sylvanas is alive. I know people want shots at bows and daggers and, Dom Sakya pieces and whatever else. So, let's do it. We ended up one-shotting it. It was actually a super clean kill, as it turned out, after, after Wednesday not being able to put it down and not having time to really even get a couple attempts in. Got a couple ahead of the curves out for people who hadn't had a chance to really see it yet. So that was cool. And then Mythic Plus, it was a pretty tough week. I mean, very beefy trash, punishing trash with Grievous and stuff, and the ghosts spiteful, just slowing everything down, just more trash in your trash. But a bunch of people I run with got our first plus 20 in time, Necrotic Wake, so that was pretty awesome to unlock that teleport, even on a what I would consider a middle of the road to difficult week. It's not the easiest, it's not the hardest, but I think it's closer to the harder end of the scale. So that was really fun to finally get that pay. We've done a lot of plus 20s over the last month or so without being able to nail one. And Necro was probably a good pull for the first one, because I think it's one of the easier dungeons. So that felt really great. And that means everybody that was in the group gets 20s this week. This week I think is going to be pretty good for a tyrannical week. So might be able to knock out a couple more.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's such a cool perk. I really like that addition. Beyond that stuff, I mean, honestly, just pretty much raid logging, logging on for raid and dungeon nights, doing weeklies. The Korthia weeklies are very lucrative for the amount of time investment that they ask you for. So kind of knock those out after reset. And then I'm mostly just doing table and conservatory outside of raid time. But, I still feel like, and maybe 9.2 will change this, but I don't feel any big pull to play my alts, because there's too many hoops to jump through to get them to a point where they're comfortable to use for anything.
Right.
And I don't have any goals left on my main. I blasted through so much of the 9.1 content early that there's nothing that I really want to focus on. So just enjoying having a lighter schedule.
Yeah. I mean, you have to really enjoy the gameplay loop, at least, to do alts and do alt stuff. That has to be something you enjoy doing at max level. So if it's not something that's really singing to you at the moment, then it makes sense.
Yeah, and you have to be so kind of persistent. You have to make sure you log in every day and check the map for what conduits you need, and that whole thing. It's like, if you're not really invested in doing that stuff on a very regular basis on an alt, which I feel like is different than in the past, where it's like, if I do this weekly stuff on my alt, I'm good. There's some stuff that right now feels like you can't ever get over the hump unless you're really persistent on an alt. And I don't want to play alts like I play my main. You know what I mean? Right. I don't want to just I'm essentially maining this character for this duration of time. That's just, I don't like it. So that's why I'm not doing it.
Cool. This past week for me was interesting because I actually worked during our Mythic Raid nights. So we normally do our Mythic Raid clears. So we normally do a one night clear or a 2 night clear, either it's Tuesday or Wednesday. But this week I was working those evenings, which meant that I was not saved to anything. So I actually went into the weekend with an open Mythic lockout, and I was able to pop in with some friends who I haven't played with in years, which was really fun, and run with them.
Nice.
So that was a really good time. I enjoy those, periods of time during farm where it's not a big deal if you miss one raid every now and then. My work schedule, because we had someone called out sick, which just happens sometimes, and I had to pick up some shifts, which messed up my raid week. But then it's nice to be able to sort of ping a couple of people and go, hey, do you guys need another person or one other person in this week? And it'd be cool to run with you again and actually make that happen. So yeah, I had a good time running with some people I hadn't run with in a while and connecting with them again.
That's a great part of the game.
Yeah, it's one of the neatest things about World of Warcraft is you're able to just sort of reach out and make connections that you have that 2 years later still as if you just spoke to them 3 days ago, kind of thing. It's always interesting because you have something so in common and so persistent with World of Warcraft that it doesn't feel like you've been apart for as long as you have. So I did that, and then obviously we had the Morgan Day interview, and I did some Brove Night gaming, but as far as World of Warcraft goes, didn't get up to too much outside of that. The work week just sort of swallowed up the rest of my week. This week, though, big plans, and obviously we'll get into that a little bit later in the show, because there's a holiday event happening, and there's some stuff from the holiday event that's new that I want to get, so I'm doing that. All right, with that, let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. Oh, wrong one. All right, this week is the Shadowlands dungeon event, meaning the Sign of the Warrior buff is up, where the final boss of each Shadowlands dungeon, with the exception of on Mythic Keystone difficulty, drops an additional piece of loot. And there's a quest to complete 4 Mythic dungeons. It can be just normal Mythics or Mythic Keystone, and that will reward a Heroic Sanctum Treasures cache, so you can get yourself a piece of Heroic gear if that's something you're looking for. Always a nice weekly event to run into, because for those people who are still looking to get a couple of pieces of heroic gear, or for those people who just like to run Mythic Plus all the time, it's like a freebie. It's like, here you go. You're going to do your 4M plus dungeons anyways, so here's a piece of gear. It might be for your off spec, it might be for an alt, it might be for whatever it is you're looking to do, but I like it. It's one of the better events. It's
great for getting an alt kind of up to speed for this season, because if you're doing Mythic Zeros, you will get a bunch of extra loot, which if you could stack your group, with some of the same armor classes and stuff, you can get a bunch of, you just distribute some pieces, right? And then, the Heroic Sanctum piece is a real nice benefit. I feel like 4 Mythic Zeros is a pretty low bar, and that's a pretty nice reward for clearing that bar. So, it's kind of like if you're a dungeon player, you're probably doing 4 dungeons most weeks. It's a holiday week. That might complicate things. It probably will for me. But, it's a nice bonus if you're just a dungeon player. And if you're somebody who has tunes that need some item level, it's a great event to work on that, I think, especially if you get some friends to go with you.
Yeah. All right, weekly world boss this week is Nurgash Muckform, the big dredger in Revendreth. If you want to head out there and get yourself your 200 eye level Covenant ability Conduit, or some 207 eye level gear, you can do that. And Jason, which memories is the big dredger Nurgash dropping for us?
So Nurgash is the guy who loves warlocks or hates them. I can't decide what this means, but he does have 2 warlock memories, Erratic Felcore and Ashakir's Madness, and also Frenzied Monstrosity for DKs. So if you don't have all of your DK or warlock memories, make sure you do Nurgash this week.
Cool. And then, of course, there's also Murgeth, the Torment of the Damned, the big Mossworn in Desmateron. Both of these role bosses give you 500 anima apiece, so if you're trying to complete your 1,000 anima quest for the week, you can just knock out both these role bosses and you'll be all done that quest. So easy renown if that's something you're trying to do too. Be sure you're knocking these guys out. All right, as far as Torghast goes, we have Fractured Chambers and Coldheart Interstitia. If either of those are ones you want to run, I will reinforce that Torghast is still a great way to farm renown, doing like a 9s or 10s. To get through the runs quickly, so you can have these nice 3 to 5 minute runs trying to get with a chance at renown at the end. And you get a bunch of legendary mats, which is also just nice to have, since we know going forward in 9.2 you will still need Soul Ash and Soul Cinders to craft your way up towards being able to use that Cosmic Flux to make your new legendary, or at least to make a higher rank of them. So be sure you're got a little stockpile going, as long as it's not a bad thing to have.
Yeah, you're gonna need to at least get up to like I don't know. It sounds like you're gonna need to get to 6s basically, and then take 6s to the season 3. Yeah. So yeah, you just do this stuff. I'm hearing some pretty good things about leveling in Torghast as well. So those are options. Remember, you can do that now. To me that seems like kind of a decent way to go, because you're getting currency, you're getting renown on your way up, you're getting XP, and you're sort of just doing combat. If you just like to fight stuff and the questing thing is kind of not your thing, and dungeons can be complicated because there's other people in there. Torghast might be a good option. I want to check it out at some point. I'm not in the headspace right now that I want to level up and all, but I think when I get there, I'm going to give Torghast leveling a shot.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the boss rush stuff that Morgan talked about in 9.2. Just an entire wing of just floors where you spawn in, go kill a boss, spawn in, go kill a boss, and get some cosmetics and whatnot rewards out of that. That to me sounds super
that could be really cool.
Yeah. Especially as a class that has really powerful 3-minute cooldowns. You just reset every floor and you just go in and kill the boss of your floor. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm curious about it. All right, in Oribos, we have the Sanguine Depths and Halls of Atonement dungeon quests that you can pick up in the basement of the inn. So if you want to run those dungeons this week, be sure you pick up these quests ahead of time to get yourself some extra rep and some extra AP. And then PvP quests this week are rated BGs and epic BGs. So if you're someone who likes Battlegrounds, be sure you pick up your PvP quests before you go in and do them, because you'll get yourself some extra conquest and whatnot out of that. Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Tyrannical, Inspiring, and Quaking, meaning that boss enemies have 30% more health and inflict 15% increased damage. And some non-boss enemies have an Inspiring presence that strengthens their allies, making them immune to CC. And Quaking means periodically all players emit a shockwave, inflicting damage and interrupting nearby allies. So this is actually a pretty good week because it's very non-synchronous. There's nothing really symbiotic about these. Inspiring does make trash more of a pain in the butt to do. However, it's not a fortified week with Inspiring, which means that trash still dies quickly. So you can actually kill the Inspiring mob very quickly if that's something you want to do. Remember, you can always CC the Inspiring mob and pull the other mobs away from it. The Inspiring presence is just an aura, which means it only strengthens nearby allies, which means that you can pull mobs away from it and then deal with them and then kill the Inspiring mob after, or pull the whole pack, kill the Inspiring mob really quickly, and then move on from there. Quaking's almost like a non-affix, as long as you're paying attention to it so you don't get yourself interrupted, particularly if you're a healer. When Quaking's happening, you're fine, as long as you aren't in the middle of a big cooldown. Someone who's running Convoke or something like that and getting interrupted by Quaking, then you're good. Those are the only sort of situations where it becomes really serious. Very tight corridors can be tricky, but spacing out around that 5-yard circle isn't too hard to do. So I like that. And then Jason already talked about Tyrannical being one of those affixes that some weeks are better for than others. This is one of those better weeks for Tyrannical. If you have to run into it, you're not going to be dealing with any sort of other affixes that affect the boss when it comes to that, other than Quaking and having to space out. That's about it.
Yeah, there's a couple situations you could think of where positioning on the boss is really important, and Quaking can interfere with that, like last boss in Sanguine Depths or third boss in Plaguefall. But if you're careful, you can make it happen, even if you get a really bad overlap. And most of the time, Quaking is a relatively minor nuisance outside of that. Inspiring's like a reverse on death effect. A lot of times you want to stack the on death effects up so everything dies at the same time. This one, it's like if you really just need to deal with something, just kill it, or just CC that one and pull stuff away from it, or whatever the case may be. I think like Mists of Tyrnacythe, right? There's some of those packs where you might get a healer and the thing that roots everybody together, and if there's an Inspiring mob in there, you probably want to isolate that one and kill everything else away from it. It might cost you some time, but if everything's full healing while you're rooted in AoE, then you're probably going to wish that you had spent that time on the CC instead of dying to that. So, there's still puzzles to solve, but I do think this is a good week to get some Tyrannical points. Inspiring is not going to be an issue on the bosses at all. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I guess if you really want to drag an Inspiring mob on top of a boss, you're like allowed to do that, but I don't think it's meta. I don't think anybody's out there doing that. And yeah, quaking is way less obnoxious than it used to be. It can present some sticky situations, but as long as you're spaced out and everybody's paying attention to their positioning, then you can really pretty much negate the effect of it. So you are going to hit your ceiling with Tyrannical, and you are going to run into a boss that you can't kill, which means you can't complete the dungeon. But until you get that far, I mean, this is one of the better Tyrannical combos I feel like we could really ask for. Like, you can really just plow through trash this week and just load up for the bosses, and I think that's really what you want to do on a Tyrannical week ultimately.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely one of the better weeks that we have out there for Tyrannical. All right, PvP brawl-wise, we have Warsong Scramble, and this is just Warsong Gulch with modified rules, where essentially you don't have to have your flag in your base to cap the enemy flag. You can just run and cap them. It's the first person to capture 10 flags wins, and so you basically just blitz each other as fast as you possibly can to try and get through it. Of course, this is the Something Different quest, which gives you Marks of Honor, Conquest, and Honor. Every day you queue in, you can actually get an additional chunk of Conquest for the first win that you get. So it's certainly worthwhile doing if you're someone who's trying to farm up Conquest. Overall, pretty uninspired brawl, though. Not super excited about this at all.
Yeah, the cool thing about this is the games are just really fast, right? Because you can cap flags while flags are out, so there's not that sort of tension around, you have this tight window to get the flag in. So if you want to just blast through some Warsong quickly, then this brawl is probably for you, because the games are like breakneck compared to the normal mode. It's not really one of the wackier brawls, but it is cool to be able to just get really fast games, and I do like that element of it.
Cool. WoW's 17th anniversary is still going. It goes until December 6th, so you've got a little bit of time left. You got to log in to get that anniversary package, which has your 200 Time Warp badges, an invitation from the Time Walkers to go down to the Caverns of Time and meet up with Chromie, who's got some quests for you to defeat all the world bosses that respawn in. All the old world bosses come back in that you can go out and kill for fun transmogs and more Time Warp badges. You also have your little celebration firework that you get, and the celebration package item, which is you basically just use it once, and you get that permanent buff for the duration of the event that increases your experience and reputation gain by 17%. You also have the new world boss up with Doombringer, or Doomwalker, where you can essentially go just outside, literally walk outside of the Caverns of Time is where his spawn is, and he drops a toy, as well as some transmog, as well as a guaranteed mount drop. The Illidari Doomhawk mount is a guaranteed drop now, so if you haven't killed him yet, be sure you just go out, basically, knock this boss over and get yourself a free mount. It's worth doing every single time. We also have the Korok's Revenge event going on right now with Alterac Valley, where you can go back and queue up for the old school BG. I'll remind everyone that there is a toy you can just buy at the start of that, at the beginning, while you're still inside the cavern. One of the vendors at the front just sells you a toy that basically teleports you back to your main Alterac Valley base. But it's a free toy for the event, so you can just pick it up, buy it, fills out a UI element, gets you another toy towards your toy counter. So be sure you're picking that up as well. There's, of course, the mounts as well for the Korok's Revenge event with the Stormpike Battle Ram and the Frost Wolf Snarler, if those are ones you're trying to get. And then, Jason, tell us about the trivia questions.
So there's a daily trivia question quest. You have a different lore keeper depending on your faction of choice, but it is in the Caverns of Time, as part of the whole celebration, the whole decorated sort of area down there. And you have a question from you get a random question from the pool of questions. It's a multiple choice. You choose the correct answer and you get like 10% of a level. So it's kind of a nice perk. It's not quite as dramatic as it was maybe 2 years ago or something, when everything was just over the top with the double XP and all that. But it's still pretty nice if you're working on leveling up a character. There's a portal right over there to Caverns of Time from the portal room, so you can get there very quickly. The boss is right there, the quests are right there, and yeah, it's nice. I mean, there's really no reason not to go kill Doomwalker, even if you don't care about mounts and toys. It's very low effort. I think there's also some gear you can get. 226 weapons at max level, right? So they're not guaranteed, but still maybe a good reason to do it. So. Yeah, honestly, after the first day, I haven't been participating in this very much because the XP for the trivia questions is not great, even though it's super low effort. It's just like it's not good. It doesn't feel good enough to justify me doing something I don't really want to do, which is like cycle through all of my characters and do that.
That is a good thing to do, though. If you're someone who like has the effort and has the time, it is easy experience that's just given to you.
Yeah. If it's your current project or whatever, if it's a thing you want to do, like it's decent XP considering that all you have to do is basically be in the caverns of time. Right.
Yeah.
So, I think, the way they built up the 17th anniversary event over the years is really cool. There's just not a lot in it for me this year necessarily. I'm not really, it's a great leveling thing. The XP bonus, the rep bonus, the gear you can get off of the world bosses, all that stuff it's awesome. I'm just not really taking advantage of it this time around.
Right. Yeah. Pilgrim's Bounty has started. It started today, basically, is what we're rolling into.
It's actually starting an hour and a half from now, but by the time most people are listening to this, it will have started. I went out to check it out and I was like, oh, it didn't start yet. Then I looked at my calendar and said 10 a.m. Pacific, which it isn't that yet. So that's why it didn't start. But it'll be going on by the time most of you hear this.
Exactly. And that goes live through the 30th of November. So you got a little bit of time. You got a week to basically indulge in your Pilgrim's Bounty. And by indulge, I mean eating all of the feasts, especially if you're a Night Fae player, because there's a new thing where when you get the Spirit of Sharing buff by eating all of the different foods at the table inside one of your major cities, you get yourself a turkey soul critter shape. So if you like turning into a turkey whenever you're inside rested areas, you could do that. That's
I mean, who doesn't really?
Yeah. So definitely be sure you're doing that. Ventir players. Theatar is showing up at all of your what are they called? The feasts that
the Ember Court.
Thank you. Yes, it's showing up at all the Ember Courts and dropping down a big old never-ending feast for everyone to indulge, which means players get double friendship by eating from that feast while they're there, so you can actually make your friends much faster this week if you're someone who's doing Ember Court things, which is something that I'm doing. So I will try and take advantage of this week.
Yeah, just don't do it like right now because it's a weekly thing, right?
Exactly.
So then if there is a 3-hour window where you could potentially do it after reset, but before the holiday starts, which you wouldn't get this benefit.
Exactly. So. Yeah. So you want to be sure you're waiting until the event's up. Be sure you go and get your Spirit of Sharing buff and then go into it because that way you know it's up. All right. As far as the Spirit of Sharing goes, that buff gives you 10% rep gain for 1 hour. So that's a decent thing to pick up if you are, trying to farm a particular rep. Maybe before it. I don't know if it applies to the new reputations out in Korthia, but it's worth trying to sort of pick up this buff and test to see whether or not it works on Korthian reps. Because
I'm sure it doesn't work with Archivist. Like it just doesn't. That's not how that functions. But it probably works with Death's Advance. I guess the question is, does it stack with the 17% that we're getting? A lot of times that doesn't really work out. Like we've seen a bunch of holiday buffs that we tried to stack with Darkmoon Faire, and it didn't work that way.
Yeah,
maybe because these are two unique holidays, they allow them to stack. In which case, that's 27% extra rep.
Oh my God.
That's really nice if that's how that works.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's at the moment we don't know for sure, but it's worth a shot. It's worth going to the outskirts of a major city, eating some food, and then doing a thing that gives rep and just see what the number is in the blue text.
If it was 100 and it suddenly says 127, you're like, oh, it's on now.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. As far as the cooking related rewards, there's daily quests for Pilgrim's Bounty, which can get you all the Pilgrim's attire, as well as the transmogs that are attached with those. And then the pets wise, you have the plump turkey from completing the holiday meta achievement. This is one of my favorite pets because if you put down a cooking fire and then summon your plump turkey, it will kamikaze itself into the fire and cook itself. It'll just cook itself on the fire.
It's pretty funny. Does that work? Fantastic. Like if you isn't there a thing that turns like a tree form druid into a cooking fire? Like you set yourself on fire. And
I don't think that runs into it. I don't
does that
think
work
so.
all the way? Because that would be great. That would be
I could get a friend and try it. I mean, I have the
great
glyph
interaction
to do it. Yeah. There's also the frightened bush chicken from Pilgrim's Bounty rewards, which is a very different looking chicken. It's a little bit more cartoonish.
It's a weird looking chicken. If you ever did Searing Gorge after the Cataclysm rework, which is now most of the game's history, but Yeah, there's bush chickens all over the place in there, and they're weird looking chickens.
They are weird looking chickens. And then, of course, the toy, the silver plated turkey shooter. If you have not picked this up yet, it's a toy that on a 5-minute cooldown lets you shoot someone and cover them in feathers. It basically just turns them into a turkey for a period of time. So it will not make your friend's suicide into a fire. It does not do that. There's no like you get mind controlled and it walks you into a fire, although that would be hilarious. That is not something that it does. So don't be expecting those things to overlap.
This is definitely a toy that you need in your collection. Like if you don't have the silver-plated turkey shooter, you have to go get that this week because you'll enjoy it for many years to come. You know, it's just like a random raid night in July, and you blast somebody with the turkey shooter. It's just funny. It's funny every time.
I've learned from raid nights that anything that changes someone else's appearance is something people have. Like appearance swaps
at the ready,
anything.
hot keyed. Yep.
Anything like that, or even a swap blaster. Changing someone's position is another very popular thing that I see happen a lot. Yeah. All right. We have a post here about gearing in Eternity's End from Kyvax, speaking specifically about some of the tier set bonuses, some of the legendary stuff, and some of the rune carving around this new belt that we're sort of talking about. So what we learned from this, and this is all information that's been out there for almost a week now, because I think it came out Thursday last week.
Something like that. Very, very good blue post. This is the kind of thing, like they're getting way out in front of this, which I super appreciate. I feel like in the past, this might not have been stuff that was outlined this way before even like a PTR came out or something. So we've gotten a lot of really good info, I think, about 9.2 already. Like, yes, as we kind of mentioned at the top, like questions kind of beget more questions, and there's all kinds of stuff that we want to see about this patch. But like, This blog post was a very welcome surprise because I think we got some really good information about the intent of the system and what to expect. I think setting expectations is very important.
Yeah, so he gave some examples of tier sets, although we actually have the data mine tier sets out there now. So if you want to see all of those, I would recommend just going over to Wowhead and looking at their post on tier sets because they have all of them that currently exist in the PTR. Now, keep in mind, all of these will probably change. They'll be a little bit different from what they are right now. Even from talking with Morgan about what their goal and objective was for these tier sets, it is to make people feel like they should adapt their play style a little bit to these tier sets. So right now, looking at some of these tier set bonuses, they don't really affect people in a large way. So I wouldn't be surprised if once feedback starts rolling in and PTR is live, if some of these get tweaked to sort of, be a little bit more impactful or a little bit, at least impact your play style a little bit more, which I think
PTR is really malleable too. I think that's maybe a good thing to point out as we're about to enter like a very big PTR cycle. Part of the reasons why they do PTRs and why they function the way they function is because devs can very quickly implement something in an environment that people can play. Which means sometimes there's stuff in there that is never intended to go live. Sometimes there's stuff in there that is placeholders because they're just not ready to push like an iteration of a design yet, but they need data in the build for some reason. And, sometimes it's, as we get closer to the end, it's sort of polishing it up for the version that they expect us to play at the outset. So, at the moment, there is no PTR you can log into. The PTR is, data mineable, but that doesn't mean that anybody's playing it yet. So, I would expect tweaks and changes to many of the bonuses. I would also expect that some of the bonuses that go live will be just sort of passive bonuses that are cool to have and don't really affect rotations. I don't see them coming out of the gate with like 36, bonuses that are completely altering everybody's play style.
Right.
I think it'll be kind of a mixed bag. Like some of it'll be kind of really altering, some of it'll be more passive, some of it'll be, a little bit in the middle. But that's the cool thing about having tier sets, and that's the thing that I have missed about them the most in the last couple of years is that sort of refresh of like, okay, how does my priority system change? What abilities is this modifying? Does this button feel better to press now than it did last patch? Like.
Right.
That was a cool thing they had done with them over the last like several expansions, and it's been missing, I think.
Yeah. As far as legendaries go, they basically just put the term of you'll receive a legendary belt. So I'm assuming we somehow from completing a quest just actually are handed a legendary belt
Maybe.
that is empowered with all of our Covenant sort of abilities, our actual main Covenant abilities for a legendary. So it's basically you're going to get a belt that does everything for every Covenant that when you are aligned to that Covenant, that your Covenant legendary did previously. So for me, I already have a belt that does that because I'm playing Venthyr at the moment, and Venthyr, the best slot to put their ability on was belt, so that's where that went, which means I'll replace my current belt with this other belt, presumably. And what that then does, as through part of this unlock process, is allows you to equip 2 legendaries. You can equip this belt, or at least this rune carving memory. I'll get into that in a second, as well as another legendary. Now, I say this rune carving memory because if you don't want the belt, say, one second, I'm totally going to sneeze. Whoa. If you don't want the belt, say, in my situation, I've already crafted the belt, which means that I don't need another one. I'll just take this belt and put it in my bank or something like that. You can essentially get a rune carving power that lets you put this Covenant ability on something else. So same way as any other legendary. Let's say you said, you know what? I want to put this on my shoulders and put this other one on my chest. So I'm wearing shoulder legendary, chest legendary, which means you can't wear your tier set. So just keep that in mind as far as where you're choosing to place these, because it's still helm, shoulders, chest, gloves, and helm, shoulders, chest, boots, and it's not boots. You're right. It's gloves. Helm, shoulders, chest,
gloves, legs usually.
Legs. Yeah, that's what it is. There's no boots in this one because I'm used to having 6. Which is why boots always ended up in there. But yeah,
well, they did cape in Legion too, because because everything, there were so many slots that were spoken for with artifacts and 2 legendaries and all that. Yeah. So yeah.
So, but let's say let's say you wanted to craft it into a different one of those slots. Things like helm, shoulders, and chest all have and legs all have higher itemization than slots that aren't those, meaning that they can roll. Well, they just do roll higher main stat and secondary stats on them. So since your legendaries tend to be a higher item level than what normal items you can accomplish or receive, it's nice to craft a legendary on one of those 4 slots because it'll be more powerful. So you could wear this belt and then you could craft another legendary inside one of those other slots, or you could craft this as a neck piece if you wanted to and make your neck the swappable legendary. It's just neat. They just went, you know what, we're not going to just give you a belt and this is going to be the belt that everyone has to wear and everyone's going to wear this belt and this is the thing that everyone has on throughout the rest of the expansion. They went, no, we'll give you this belt, but we'll also give you the option. We'll give you the rune carving memory, let you craft it on something else. So,
because if you have maybe you're using the belt as your legendary slot already, right? And you have like a rank 6 in there and you want to bump it up to rank 8 or whatever the new top rank is. Well, you'd probably rather do that and then move this one around to another slot potentially. There's no reason not to have the flexibility. I think there is a little bit of ambiguity here because it's certainly the beginning of this section makes it sound like as we kind of do quests for the Enlightened Brokers, we eventually just receive or can buy the legendary belt. But then a little bit later, it says, there's no need to craft a new legendary belt for each Covenant. So I don't know if that means we're crafting the first one or what. It's a little ambiguous.
It's one of those questions for the next interview if we get one.
yeah. It'd be really great if it was just like, here, complete these tasks, work with these NPCs to accomplish this stuff, and then have this legendary belt. As I kind of mentioned, I think on last week's show, like the 2 legendaries thing, the excitement's a bit blunted for me because I don't really care to use my Covenant legendary. It doesn't make me better at my main job, right? Which is obviously when Shadowlands came out, we had the single legendary restriction. You're looking at your legendary power pool and going, wouldn't it be cool if I could use these 2 together? And we know precedent from Legion and all that. Like, I think we kind of expected we'd be using 2 legendaries by the end of this expansion. So it was a little bit disappointing, but if all I have to do is just like kind of play through the stuff I'd be doing anyway, and if I don't have to really invest any effort in, obtaining the soul cinders and the soul ash so I can make a rank 4 and a rank 6 to get it to a rank 8, like, I think it's a great way to do it. It kind of gives you, a cool intro to the zone and a really powerful item out the other side. So hopefully it does work like that, and then you have the option to move it around as you care to. Like that's a nice feature.
Yeah. And then the creation catalyst being something that we actually talked about with Morgan a fair bit when we were doing the interview this past Friday, is basically a system where you're able to take gear from Mythic Plus or PvP or from your Great Vault and turn it into a tier piece, which is one of those great things. You'll essentially get this cosmic flux resource that's out there. You'll go to this machine. You'll take your 265 non-set piece chest and put it in the machine and click a button, and it'll suddenly become a 265 set stats, preset stats. It doesn't, change stats based off the piece you put in. The piece you put in literally is just an eye level guide. That's all it's doing, is it's going to make a tier piece near that eye level, as opposed to it doing anything with, tertiaries or other stats or anything like that. So you just put it in, you click the button, it gives you this default, tier piece, and you can get yourself some tier gear. We really like this concept because it basically means that people don't have to do the raid in order to get their tier sets for whatever activity they want to do it in. Tier sets are going to work in all the activities. They're going to work in PvP and Mythic Plus and everything else. They don't turn off and on based off of the zone that you're in. They don't change based off the zone that you're in. And you end up with overall people being able to get these sets. Now, what's the benefit, you think, to raiders? Because raiders love tier. Well, Jason clarified that the benefit is the creation catalyst is going to take some time, not a lot of time, hopefully, but some time to unlock, meaning that for the first couple of weeks that the raid's out, probably only raiders will be able to get the tier sets. So they'll have the not only the additional source of getting tier gear, but they're going to have the early source of getting tier gear out onto them. So that's the large benefit, really.
Plus, you're going to need the flux, right? You need the cosmic flux. So, I don't know what the yield on that is going to look like or how annoying it's going to be to have enough of that to transform a piece. But it's not just like, oh, I get this item, and then with no other, thought or effort, it just becomes this other item that I want. Like, you do need the currency. So, it's definitely the most time efficient way. If you're in a raid team that can kill bosses that drop these, that's the way to get it, is to kill the boss and have it drop. Hoping to get an equivalent item level, piece in that slot, and then having enough currency to transform it is certainly an option, but it's also, it's just nowhere near as efficient as getting it off the boss kill. So yeah, it's, this is a really interesting system. We've never really seen anything like this before in terms of, end game gear, and just being able to say, okay, I have this, I would like to exchange it for this particular thing. Here's some currency to sweeten the deal. I think there's a lot of potential for a system like that, going forward. We talk a lot, and throughout Shadowlands, we've talked a lot about streak protection, and wouldn't it be cool if we could just acquire some currency that would allow us to, target the thing we want, even if it was a lot of currency. I think something like this, if this works out okay, and if people seem happy with this, and if they're happy with it from, a game design perspective, like I can see some real potential in this philosophy going forward, where it's like, all right, you have this thing that you can put on your character, and you have this other stuff that's considered valuable or powerful to NPCs or whatever. And yeah, so you can combine these two things and create a particular item that has eluded you. I love that, because it gives people incentive to play the game, kill more bosses, get more drops, get more stuff out of treasure chests, do more activities that reward the currency. These are things that we just want in an MMORPG like WoW, right? Like we want to feel like doing that dungeon or killing that raid boss or doing that battleground was worth it. That we got something tangible for the time investment and the effort we put into it. And I do think that's been lacking in this expansion. And I think a system like this can really help with that.
Yeah, it certainly can. Okay, we got a blog post that further dives deep into what they're calling the solo shuffle, which is the brawl that they're going to put out that allows PvP players to actually queue up solo. But it's not just that. They've also sort of explained beyond that more of what this could look like going forward if it actually implemented as a regular queue system. All of this is not in the game yet. This is something that they're basically saying, hey, we've heard your feedback. This is where we're at and where we're kind of thinking things are going. And I would presume that's to then hear what the community has to say about their plans, about what this is going to look like. It's a great blog post. And basically, they just I don't want to read the whole thing because it's actually a fairly lengthy blog post, but I do want to read some chunks of it. So why solo queue? Well, first we'd like to talk about the reasons players want solo queue arena, as we understand them. Many players have a general love for arena, but their regular partners are not always around to team up. While the group finder is available, players have given us feedback that it can take too long to find suitable partners with the tool. While we are working on improving the group finder, we acknowledge that there are times players just want to press the button and start playing. Of course, such a solution exists in skirmishes. Players can queue for skirmishes either solo or in a party, and quickly participate in an arena match to receive honor and conquest, but for many, skirmish isn't an appealing option. Certainly part of the appeal of arena is the higher stakes at play when you put your rating on the line each time you queue up for a match. Seeing your rating increase after a big win is fundamentally different. Is a fundamentally different form of progression than earning honor or conquest to purchase equipment. Gear upgrades are also a likely contributor, as while skirmish do reward honor and conquest, they do not offer rating required to increase the item level of your gear. In general, across World of Warcraft, the best gear rewards are offered from content that requires pre-made groups, raiding, arena, rated battlegrounds, and Mythic Plus, and not queued activities such as Raid Finder, raids, heroic dungeons, battlegrounds, and skirmishes. So while we understand the desire to have a solo queue arena, we have some reservations about adding it to the existing bracket of 2v2, 3v3 RPGs based on observations from WoW and other games. Now, Jason, there's an example here for you.
Yeah, actually, this part I think really spoke to a lot of stuff that we've talked about on the show many times over the years. Now, granted, you and I are not really very dedicated PvP players. This change, I don't think, really affects either one of us very much, because it's not like we play arena very much, or that solo queue arena has been a thing that we've been asking for or anything. It doesn't impact the way I play the game at all. But I think this kind of highlights the tension around, like, why hasn't this ever existed yet, and like, why are they rolling it out this way? And also, I think it leads to some other questions about some other modes. But they say, for example, while it's very likely that a solo queue solution will increase the overall participation in arenas, it will also mean players won't need to form groups to participate. While systems like Dungeon Finder and Raid Finder have made content much more accessible, players have also given feedback on the impact those systems have on the social element of the game. Queued systems can make other players feel more dispensable, since replacements are only a few button clicks away. The process of assembling a group for an activity provides immeasurable value to the social dynamics of a game like WoW. As such, we prefer to keep the preformed group requirement in place for the 2v2 and 3v3 brackets.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really agree with that sentiment and that kind of philosophy. I think that's kind of the reason why the Mythic Plus system has been able to flourish as much as it has over the last 5 years.
Well, I would even take the negative example of, it's one of the reasons why Raid Finder is looked on as such a negative experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I kind of wish that there was some way that raiding in particular could sort of benefit from this philosophy somehow. Like, yes, the higher item level gear is that's the motivator in a way, but it's like, I feel like rating has been sort of more specifically harmed by these systems. I think keeping solo queue for arenas as a brawl for now is smart, because you can really get a sense of how this is going to play out, who's going to participate in it, and how it affects things overall. I mean, I think your average player who doesn't tend to do arenas is not going to decide that solo queue week is the week to jump in there. It's not going to be a great experience for them. They're going to get probably housed by players that are serious arena players. They're not going to gain much rating or anything. So, I don't know. It's probably not going to be a thing that really draws people in on that basis. So, does that provide, if it's mostly your core arena audience that's playing it, like, hopefully you can get some valuable feedback and data about it. For Dungeon Finder, I think they did have a problem as a result of Dungeon Finder for a long time, because dungeons became really easy, and for a while dungeons became pointless. You would gear up through the dungeon pool very quickly at the outset of an expansion, and then if you were a raider or a PvPer, you just move on with your life. The dungeons never mattered anymore, because the gear was very low item level compared to other rewards you would get. The dungeons themselves didn't present any kind of like repeatable fun challenge. They were face roll, right? It was only until Warlords of Draenor that we saw the concept of a mythic dungeon, and even that was like not challenging for your average raider and group of raiders, but it was harder, and you had to form a group and actually go there.
Yeah,
and so it wasn't until Legion that, you know, Mythic Plus kind of resolved that problem that Dungeon Finder introduced back in 2009.
Yeah, I want to jump in because the other issue here that I really want to highlight that they emphasize here is when you are able to click a button and queue for a group, there's very little connection made with the other people in the group. When you are putting together an arena group to do 3v3 together or 2v2 together, there's often conversation that happens with the person, there's communication that happens and coordination that happens, and you end up making a connection. I've definitely made friends through queuing up for arenas with someone early onset inside an expansion when we're both just trying to find someone to queue with, and then repeatedly queued with that same person going forward after we, you know, added each other as BattleTech friends and that sort of stuff. One of the things that we saw happen with, you know, Raid Finder and dungeon queuing with the Dungeon Finder was that aspect of the game was no longer necessary for forming a group. You no longer had to whisper someone and say, hey, I'm interested in going to this, you know, group, and you have a communication. Like, even on that basis level of saying, hello, I'm interested, that just went away. It became a click a button, you're put into a group with a bunch of strangers, you do the thing that you're trying to accomplish without having to communicate with them, and you leave. And that became more and more of a common thing. Whereas, you know, with Mythic Plus, for example, there is a little bit more of that communication that can happen. Even so, on keys that are not as challenging or weeks that are not as challenging, even that communication level isn't there. And I think that almost contributes to some of the frustrations that arise with Mythic Plus, where there's an assumption that everyone knows what they're doing inside of these keystones. Everyone's going to know what route the person who's leading the group wants to take, and is going to know, you know, where they need to use their cooldowns and how they need to use them, or, you know, dispels or healing or whatever it is, when that is actually needed, even though there's no communication that's happening to actually guide anyone in that direction. And I think that creates a lot of issues. And I feel like losing the communication aspect, losing that interaction with people is something that they can't dismiss, right? I'm not saying this is, you know, critical and it has to be there and they shouldn't do what they're doing and it's a bad idea. I'm saying you have to acknowledge that this is something that systems like this take away from the game. When you're going to do a click a button, queue in by yourself button for any activity, it does remove that element from the game, and that does have a negative effect overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's why in this case, like, being able to slot it in as a brawl, and it's something that comes around like once every 8 weeks or whatever, and, you know, the other mode is still there. You can still queue up with your twos partner or your threes team or whatever. Like, I think this is a genius way to try it out, right? And people know what they're getting into. If they want to put their rating on the line and gamble it in this weird kind of round robin mode, awesome. Maybe it'll be fun. Maybe, you know, the payoff from putting your rating on the line and not knowing what you're queuing in with, and maybe you come out, you know, on the other end of the 6 matches and it was worth it, and that feels great. And, you know, maybe, you know, obviously you're gonna have times where you get rolled and it doesn't feel great, but, you know, maybe it comes out in the wash if it's set up well, if it's fun to do, if it feels like it's worth it. Then if those people like it, awesome. It's not replacing, you know, anything, and it's not going to be available on a permanent basis. So I think it's like solo queue arena is something that people have been asking for a really long time. So I think this is a pretty good way to experiment with it. You know, I think the way they detail the format is interesting. It's not like a one and done. You don't just get matched with 2 other people against 3 other people and then you have your match. You know, it's going to use logic. It's going to put 2 healers and 4 DPS together,
so
and then
cool.
It's going to make.
I love this format. Yeah,
it's going to make every permutation possible with 1 healer and 2 DPS out of those 6 players, and you're going to play 6 rounds.
Yeah. It's
really cool.
It's 6 rounds, which I think is great. And they go, all right, you know, let's say you have a Paladin, Rogue, Warlock versus Shaman, Hunter, Mage. It literally will then cycle so that everyone has played with the Paladin and everyone has played with the Shaman, right? The healers are Paladin and Shaman. They stay the same on red and blue team, and all the DPS cycle through for 6 rounds until you have everyone's been paired with that healer and that healer, which means that healer's been paired with all the DPS. And I think that's a great concept. And someone might go, man, that sounds like a really long time to be in a queue if you have to play 6 rounds. So they went, okay, we don't want that. We don't want to take over 30 minutes and have people be like, I don't want to queue for this. It's going to take forever. I don't like queuing for some of the large epic BGs because they take forever for me to queue into. And I know it's going to be a big deal to do. So a 30-minute arena is something that's a pretty big commitment to. So they went, all right, this is what we're going to do. Instead of having to actually eliminate the enemy team, the first team that loses a player, so the first time someone dies on a team, boom, round ends, other team wins right off the bat. So that's great. They're also doing mana regeneration for the restricted. Drinking will work, but the mana regeneration is restricted. So just keep that in mind. They have considered making it so that drinking won't work at all. That's another thing they're looking at. So mana is just a very finite resource. And then if a player leaves, the match is resolved as if that player lost the round. So just right off the bat, guess what? Match ends. So they are thinking this through, I think, from one of the best perspectives I've seen design-wise for this. And it could be that a lot of systems are thought through this way and they just don't share this level of design with the public. It's very internal. So I love this post. This is one of my favorite posts we've seen out of design from Blizz, simply because they not only go through what the solo queue issue is and why they think it's important and what they're hearing, what they understand from the community. So basically saying, this is what we hear from you as issues, but they're saying, okay, here's our idea and here's the fleshed out aspect of our idea. And we haven't decided when this is going to happen yet, but let us know what you think about the fleshed out area of our idea. And I think that's great. They've even talked about doing ladders and having like a ladder based off of each, brawl. I think it's great. I think it's a neat concept. It would, for a time limited thing, especially at the moment, I think that's almost more attractive to go, can you win the brawl ladder for the week is a neat objective for someone. So cool.
Well, you know what it makes me think of, if anybody is a Hearthstone player and you remember heroic tavern brawls, right? I feel like they haven't done one in a while, but this is a concept they've done a few times where, the Tavern Brawl is this rotating weekly event. It's analogous to some of the, the stuff we get in WoW every week, where there's some limited time thing you can do that's maybe outside the bounds of normal gameplay or breaks the rules a little bit. The way Heroic Tavern Brawl worked actually was, instead of just a wacky mode that you could play and just opt into, it was 1,000 gold buy-in, and 1,000 gold is, a fair amount of farming your daily quests and stuff in that game. And you would make a deck, and you then use that deck in sort of like a blind tournament format. And the goal was to win up to 12 games without losing 3. Right. And the more games you won, the bigger gold payout you get. So like you could crap out and lose your 1,000 gold, or you could make gold off of your 1,000 gold investment, depending on how well your deck performed. I feel like this concept for that brawl is sort of analogous to that type of thing, except, obviously it's not currency, in-game currency that's at stake. It's arena rating. So, I mean, it could, who knows? Maybe it works as a brawl in and of itself, right? And it's not this precursor to solo queue being added to the main game, but suddenly every, 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, there's a bunch of attention around the PvP brawl because it's solo shuffle week. And so now everybody's putting rating on the line, and maybe there's some kind of bracket or leaderboard or something else to try to work on. Maybe there's some achievement or cool reward for going 6-0, stuff like that. I mean, it even kind of reminds me of like Trials of Osiris that Destiny's been doing for a long time, this sort of like limited PvP format. Like there's a lot of potential, and I think it could really just stand on its own as a brawl without being like this dry run for solo queue being added all the time. There's just a lot of interesting choices here.
I mean, I would even picture an arena tournament based off of this kind of stuff, where literally you have all of these big names from arena queuing in solo. So a certain amount of healers, or maybe an invitational where you are bringing in a certain amount of healers,
like an invitational, and let like. Yeah, let like 20% of the bracket play in, and then invite like top performing players who are willing to from AWC. That would be a really fun
It'd be a cool
event to
tournament,
broadcast,
man. Because because then you end up with teams with really, like you have rivals who are on the same team for a couple of rounds, and who's earning points and how many points, and you can have a healing category and a DPS category as to who's going to win, and you have like awards that way. Like there's a lot of cool stuff they can do with this. So
teammates playing against each other, man.
Teammates playing against each other. Yeah, exactly.
Like a rogue trying to kill his own healer,
Yeah.
because they're on different sides of the arena. There's a lot of potential with this format.
Yeah, so I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they choose to do. All right, speaking of Arena, we got another announcement for 9.2. We know that there's going to be 2 new arenas coming to the queue. So you're actually going to be able to have 2 new ones to actually play on. One of them is the Maldraxxus Coliseum, which just makes sense. Let's be fair. Totally makes sense.
It's like our introduction to Maldraxxus as a zone is this like Coliseum and, these sort of arena gladiator type of characters. So this is not much of a stretch.
This one, to me, it's whether or not they can make this feel like a Coliseum event where there's a lot of changing elements, like platforms that move up and down, and stuff that moves around throughout it. I think would be kind of cool to sort of have it affected that way, but we'll see what they choose to do with it. Next is the Enigma Arena, which of course is on Zereth Mortis, because players in World of Warcraft can't go anywhere without fighting each other. So here it is. You go to go to Zereth Mortis, and we set up an arena there where people can fight each other. So, yep, that'll be a cool one. I'll be curious as to what this one ends up looking like and how they choose to make this one fit. I sort of picture the Bastion one that exists already, and whether or not it'd be something similar, very white and sort of gleam and shiny, or whether they're going to go something kind of crazy where it's like a meeting of 3 different areas. You have like a sand area with a grass area and a sort of non-scape.
It looks really weathered. It's like stone, like overgrown kind of stone is sort of the vibe that I'm getting from it. And there's an interesting note in the description which says there's a switch located at the center of the arena that can be used to create cover for yourself and your allies or deny it from your opponents. So there's like a sort of a transforming element of the BG or something.
That's what I want to know. So I want to know if you click that button, if it grows bushes or it grows trees, or that'd be wicked.
I assume it probably just moves a wall around or something, but
that'd be disappointing.
I don't think we've seen that's kind of a cool addition to this arena. It will probably make it a nightmare for competitive play, but it's kind of a fun element. This sort of environmental hazard inside of there that players can manipulate.
Creates a sandstorm, and then you have to worry about line of sight with outside of 10 yards or something. It'd be cool, man. You could do a lot of stuff with a button like that with strategic play.
Man, that would be really weird if it was if it created like a zone of obscurement.
Yeah. I mean, and you could have it symbolize. You could have glowing symbols above the pillars that sort of represent what the next click is going to do. So whether it's going to be foliage or it's going to be sand or it's going to be whatever it is, like lava.
I mean,
you take damage if you stand inside the hot zones of lava. Like, come on, man! They make this thing wicked.
You're asking for a Heroes of the Storm map, not a WoW arena at this point.
The thing is, to me, it's you're in the place where all things are made, right? This is the world where they create other worlds, so you can do anything you want with it. That's why I'm sort of saying this there's no logistical issue. You have the technology to just
conceptually
create things out of anything. So you could make this arena something where you're like, I click this button and suddenly there's ice on the ground, and when you try and stop, you keep sliding for a little bit, whatever they want to do, right? That physics that already exist in the games and exist in other zones, they could apply into this if they wanted to.
Certainly. The issue here, though, is that this is being designed as an arena, which means you expect a certain level of consistency from moment to moment. If it was a BG or something wackier, then it would be, hey, maybe they would do that as a brawl or something someday down the road the Enigma Arena is going to be a weird transforming kind of thing. But, the arena players just want to have an arena to fight in. So I don't think we're going to see anything that dramatic, but I do like the idea that there is some environmental counterplay that is dynamic in here.
Yeah. All right. With that, we're going to play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Bob, Celian, Jeff, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. That's right. We have a Patreon located over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. I'd like to give you a sort of shout out and thank you to all of our patrons, but our newest ones here, we got Robert W., Kent B., and as well as another Robert. So thank you so much for jumping in and supporting the Patreon. It means a lot to us. We use it to fund all sorts of things, including things like that interview. It allows us to sort of take the time to necessarily prep and get assets and everything else that we need going for that. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it a lot. All of our patrons have been very supportive during this lull of WoW, this sort of dull time that we've run into. 9.1.5 is not quite bringing the life back that everyone's really looking forward to as far as content goes, but it did bring some quality of life in, and now we're looking towards that PTR for 9.2. We're a few months away from that, and we'll be jumping into 9.2, and that should be the content people are looking for. That's going to bring some people back, so I'm looking forward to that happening. We do have our November patron episode coming up on this Saturday. It's going to be in the evening. It's probably going to be around 8:30, 9 o'clock. So if you want to send your reactions to 9.2 when we had that interview, feel free to send those in. That would be sort of our initial question that we put out to our patrons is, what do you think so far about 9.2? If you want to answer that question, that's great. If you want to actually be on the show live, you can simply join our Discord. You can go to thestartingzone.com/Discord and join in there. And you should, if you're a patron, get a Discord status, which lets you see the channel that we record in. You pop into that waiting room and we will drag you down, and then you can be live on the show chatting with us. If you are someone who just wants to submit a question ahead of time, feel free. You can do that both through the Discord or through Patreon. Just send us your question. You can send it now, because that way, if you're, thinking of it now and you forget, feel free to send it now so you don't forget and we have it and we can go over it on Saturday's show, which will be great. So we're happy to go through those as well.
Yeah, it's this is actually our first chance to talk to patrons since 9.2 got announced, which is weird because I don't know. It feels like it's been longer than that, I guess. It's probably just because of the amount of stuff that we've seen about 9.2 already.
Right.
Between the, initial announcement and then all the press that they did at the time, and then the blogs last week and the other press that they've done since then. Yeah, it's like I feel like we've already gotten a lot of info, and with data mining being going on for quite a few days now, even though we don't have PTR servers yet, it's like 9.2 has been kind of at the forefront for several weeks now. So it's kind of funny. It feels like it's been longer than it actually has. So this is a chance for patrons to let us know what they're thinking about the 9.2 reveals or what questions they have about what we've seen so far. And it is an exciting patch. I mean, I think, narratively, it's going sort of in a direction that I think we mostly expected. And I think at this point, you're either along for the ride with Shadowlands or you're just waiting for it to be over. I don't think anybody's like sort of on the fence about it at this point. But, it seems like they're making a lot of cool choices. We're hearing a lot of stuff that we want to hear when it comes to, how we're going to be playing with these systems and with this content. So, I think there's a lot to look forward to, and thank you patrons for sticking with us, and welcome new patrons. 3 new patrons in a week is pretty awesome. So welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you so much. If you folks have enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, leave us the 5-star review. They really help out our show, and we love hearing from you and hearing your write-ins, so we read them here live on the show. This one comes in from Sold Easy from Australia, entitled Awesome Content. It says, found this podcast at the end of BFA when I came back for Shadowlands, which made learning everything super easy. I previously played in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria, so you could imagine my confusion when they started talking about mythic keystones. But I eventually figured it out. It's cool to get updates about the game and to learn tips and tricks whilst working. My workspace is a loud environment, but the audio quality is terrific, which makes life much easier. My raid team managed to get 10 out of 10. Now it's time to farm. Much love from Australia. Sold Easy. Frosty K from Frostmourne. Well, thank you so much for writing in. We always appreciate reading that. I'm glad we're making your workday go smoother and that you're finding the show helpful to your content and how you play the game. I can certainly understand being confused about Mythic Keystones if you miss Legion. That was kind of a critical thing about Legion that people loved.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably the most impactful addition to the game that we've seen, if not ever, like certainly in the last decade or half decade. But yeah, it sort of became like a regular feature on the show very quickly, sort of describing it and talking about strategies or concerns or maybe excitement depending on the combos. But yeah, thanks for writing in. Always love to hear from the Australian WoW nerds because they're very very passionate WoW fans, and it's always cool to hear from the Australian audience.
Yeah. That wraps up episode 489 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter. Or you can join our Discord by going to thestartingzone.com/Discord and just clicking on the button there that pulls you into our Discord channel. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can go over to tpublic.com/stores/thestartingzone and get all your sweet designs that we have on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that kind of fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, always talking whatever I'm doing in and around WoW and other stuff. So come say hi.
Yeah, if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey and on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. With that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.